and especially now, like the business that we're in now, it's growing and changing so rapidly and so quickly that you have to be available, you have to respond, you have to be on top of the latest innovations.
You're listening to Creative Leadership with Heart, a podcast that inspires people to take action and be the leader they were born to be. I'm Coach Rico, and I'm known for coaching and training executives, leaders, founders, and high performers at Fortune 100 businesses, startups, and more. I'm here to answer your questions about leadership and personal development while also asking you questions that can unlock your untapped potential. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Creative Chutzpah. I'm your host, Rico Nasol. We got Leonard Samuels and our special guest today, Cameron Weathers, creative director at Amazon Studios, owner of C. Weathers Group, formerly of Booz Allen Hamilton. Why can't I speak today? Don't worry, it'll get better. Cameron, welcome. Welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me. And trust me, Booz Allen Hamilton is a lot to say.
Yeah,
so
that's
it won't be you're not the first person to be messed up by that name.
Thank you for giving me the grace. But for everybody listening who may not know, we just want to get a little history on you. So tell us about yourself, your journey as a creative. What is it about the creative industry that got you started?
Yeah. Well, first, just again, thank you for having me, Leonard. Thank you for inviting me onto this. This is a great opportunity, and love what you guys are doing. For creatives in the space, and just thinking about me as a creative, I kind of got my first. I've always been super creative, even as a child. I was always into the arts. I was.
Oh no.
Apologies, y'all. Sorry about that. We had a little technical difficulty, but Cameron is back. We're talking a little bit about your history. You were talking about you've always been a creative, and you were just getting into that story. So let's get back into it.
Yeah. So like I said, I've always been into creative. I've always been into the arts. When I was, my parents were educators, so there was always color pencils and markers and things around the house. So I just, I was always into something creative. And as I got older, I started to get into graphic design and web design. My older brother was a web designer, and so I kind of learned a lot from him and just his work, and just was interested in computers and things like that. And so I started off doing that. Was really excited about learning all things graphics. I remember even scrounging up dollars to purchase my first pre-Photoshop, pre-Paint Shop Pro, graphic creation software. But that took me a lot of places. When I was in high school and in college, I started building campaigns for friends and for nonprofits and organizations that I was in. And I found myself kind of in a space where I was like, oh, I love this. I love marketing. I love creative. I love building things. I love, I have all this vision and thoughts and imagination. And so I just kind of, followed that passion. When I was in school, I studied marketing. I had internships in tech and marketing. And when I graduated, I moved to DC to work in kind of the public sector, doing marketing, communications, and creative. With my background in graphic design, I always was kind of like a freelancer, and I started my own business doing design and marketing work. And so while I was in college, I used that to make some extra money on the side. But when I graduated, I really started to get a good amount of clients that were consistent, that were needing help and support with projects. And I eventually turned that into a business where I was actually working in politics. I was doing tech and retail and small businesses and things like that while I was working as a full-time consultant, because I just really wanted to, find opportunity for me to flex my creative skills and do it in a place where I can have more autonomy from a creative perspective, but then also just do stuff that was super interesting and super compelling for me. And so when I was in DC, I was in there for 6 years. I was doing kind of everything under the sun in public sector. And then I was kind of craving a little bit more creative stimulation, and I wanted to work on bigger projects and work on bigger brands. And so I visited LA, and I was like, I need to be in this entertainment space. Like I've always had interest in entertainment, come from a background in the arts, but the paths never crossed, and I felt that this was the perfect time to do so and leverage my marketing experience to find a path. And I end up getting a great opportunity with Amazon MGM Studios. It was Amazon Studios at the time. Now we're Amazon MGM Studios. And I jumped in using my marketing background to kind of start working as a project manager, a campaign manager. And I've taken on several roles in that job, and it kind of really allowed me to flex my skills and really show people that I had a background in marketing and creative across several industries, so it was a lot of transferable skills that I was able to bring over. And so I went from campaign manager, I worked as a strategist for a little bit, and then I took on a full-time role as a creative director in the global advertising group. So my role right now is technically senior creative advertising manager at Amazon MGM Studios in the creative advertising group, where I oversee creative and advertising campaigns for TV shows and films, everything from trailers to key art to the entire look and feel, the entire creative and advertising strategy for the campaign. I help set that. I help create all the assets and oversee the delivery of all those assets and delivery of the entire creative campaign. And so
all light work, of course, light work.
It took me a while to like get that into like an elevator pitch. So yes, it is a lot, but I really love where I've landed, and I think it's a perfect combination of creative and strategy, and obviously super creative. But it's just fun, and it's I get to work on some really cool stuff. So I'm very grateful for where my journey has taken me this far.
Yeah, I'm very familiar with that workflow from my times on studio side. So something I'd like to ask people before we get into a lot of that great stuff you mentioned, was there a moment, or was there a poster or like a show, or was there a moment you kind of fell in love, like this is what I'm going to do for a living? Like I'm going to be a designer or do this for a living.
I mean, okay, so I would say there's something that happened recently where I was like, okay, like this is where I need to be. And then like there's a moment kind of back in the day where I was like, oh, okay, I really love this. So I'll say back in the day when I first started, I didn't realize it at first, but I had built my first like real public citywide campaign. I was working with the NAACP, and I'm originally from Memphis, Tennessee, and the NAACP is obviously because of its history with Martin Luther King and just with the civil rights movement is a really big city, and NAACP had a really big presence. And so I was a part of the youth council, and I did all of our designs, a lot of our design work for our flyers and things like that when I was there. And we had this fundraiser, this like 5K run, and I built the flyer and built the banners. And before you knew it, I was like, oh, this is a campaign. Oh, this is like printed in places and all over the city. And I was like, oh, okay, I really love this. Like, I love doing this. I love seeing it everywhere. And so that was kind of like my first moment where I was like, okay, like this is clearly something that I love and that I need to lean into a little bit more. And then most recently, when I first started at Amazon, my first project that I was working on was the series remake of I Know What You Did Last Summer. Nice. And I was learning the ropes and just kind of diving into the project, and I got an opportunity to go to Vegas. We were activating at a big festival, and I got a chance to kind of oversee the activation from a creative standpoint. And I was like, okay, yeah, this is the moment where I was like, oh, I love this. I love just the energy. I love being able to be in front of consumers and create, activations that you can immerse people into your brand, and just love being on the ground, just loving being super creative and just being a part of something that was so grand and really driving pop culture. And so that moment for me, it was just like, okay, yeah, this is where I belong. So those are some of my moments.
You're a grassroots man.
Grassroots man, I'm used to, like, I've worked events, I've planned events, and so it's like just doing flexing all those muscles at the same time is just really exciting.
Yeah, and I would say, like, coming from those southern roots, going to DC, and then coming to sunny California in the vapidness of Los Angeles. What did you bring from those roots, and how have you been changing the game up out here?
Well, I don't know how much I've been changing the game up, but I will say that, moving around, I as I mentioned, I grew up in Memphis, Tennessee. I went to college at Morehouse College in Atlanta, Georgia, moved to DC after college, and then moved to LA from DC. And, I always bring my Southern roots wherever I go, but I'm also very malleable and like a kind of like chameleon. Like you can put me anywhere and I can survive, and I hope thrive. And so coming from one of the reasons why I came to LA was because of what you call vapidness, but I call just life and joy and peace and like sunniness.
Yeah.
My window's closed right now, but like, living in DC where it was cold, we only had hot weather 3 months out of the year. Pools literally opened on Memorial Day and closed on Labor Day. And that was, that combined with working through the Obama and the Trump administration and all its volatility was just not good for the mental. And so, coming out to LA, being able to kind of experience a different lifestyle, I think my Southern roots really take to this lifestyle of kind of like nature and just kind of being in the air and just kind of being a part of the atmosphere. I think that look, I always have to have my Southern flair. I always have to have my wings. I always have to have my barbecue. I always have to find those places. So I can find my food pockets, and I have my friends here. But I think it's really just about immersing yourself in California and just kind of,
you got to let those waves just wash over you, bro.
Exactly. You always got to keep a part of yourself, but I'm just one that always takes everything in and just tries to, learn from it and experience it. Just be authentic to myself. So,
yeah.
So really quickly, you mentioned it. You worked in Washington during a very polarizing time. What was it like working through that time? And what are some of the things you learned and like maybe you can apply to your craft?
I mean, I will say that working in that time was very tumultuous. It was 24/7 on the clock, trying to, big differences in between the presidencies in the sense of just the openness in the environment, and not to get into anything political or anybody's political preference, but I think everybody was just on edge just in general. And one thing that I learned throughout that process, and it really bred itself to a lot of misinformation in the digital age, and there was a saturation of content, and there was just so much being thrown at us left and right. It was really hard to decipher and really target messaging to the right audiences because they were just inundated with content everywhere. And so for me, what I learned from that experience was that the content and the things that you can throw ads at people all day, you can put flyers in front of their faces, but what's really going to get people excited about something is how it tugs at their heartstrings and how their emotional response and their emotional reaction to things. And so coming from that experience, I'm able to kind of see through all the content and the saturation and kind of be able to pinpoint what's going to work and what's not going to work. What's going to resonate with people. Is the messaging succinct enough, because people's attention spans have decreased substantially over the past couple of years, and so understanding what are the most salient points to get across to people in order for them to do whatever you want them to do with your advertising. And so I think navigating tumultuous personal and political and professional environments, as well as understanding what type of content and marketing like really sticks out, are two things that I really take from that experience and are super invaluable, especially coming into a place like the entertainment industry.
Yeah, it sounds like you got the warm up out there. When you came here, you're like, I'm ready.
There's nothing LA can do.
But this is what's so crazy. There's so many similarities, but this is a totally different beast. I mean, between, I mean, yeah, working with talent and VIPs and working with people who
Yeah.
have their own visions and priorities and who are very, focused in that. That's the through line. But like politicians and talent and creatives, two totally different beasts,
How
but
was
there's
your
a lot to learn between each of them though.
how was your transition coming from Washington to LA? Because LA, everybody wants to be a star, regardless of what you're going to get into. If you're going to get into the business of entertainment or food or whatever the case is, like everyone's clawing
Yeah.
at that position. How was your transition over here?
Well, as you mentioned, I mean, DC was kind of a warm up, right? In the same way that people are clawing for the next opportunity and trying to show face and kind of, get to where they need to get, it was the same thing in DC. It's politics. I worked with a lot of people that worked on the Hill, that worked for the administration. And there were a lot of people who were hustling for their face time. They were doing their own campaigns. They were running for office. And so I was kind of used to that in terms of the, dog eat dog nature of this industry. I just didn't realize coming over here that literally everybody was going to be doing this all day, and everybody's like,
Yeah.
main character energy, and everybody's a celebrity, and blah blah blah. So, but and so my transition, it was kind of easy because I kind of knew what to expect. I knew how to handle those types of people, and I knew how to, or I know how to make my way and cut through the noise and still stand out. I mean, also helps that I'm 6'3", and
Me too. Yeah, I get you.
But I think the transition wasn't that difficult, to be honest. I think the biggest challenge in the transition was just learning everything and just trying to understand how people move and understand the nuances of talent relations. And it's really just the how. It's less of the what, but it's more of like the how to do it and how to navigate what's probably the biggest challenge.
So we'll ask your practical advice, but I wanted to ask you, so if that was a challenge, so if somebody out there is listening and they're thinking about how can I transition from East Coast politics, advertising to West Coast entertainment, like what should they prepare themselves for? Like what advice would you give folks wanting to make that move?
I would say you have to frame your mind coming into this space. You have to know that expect the unexpected, expect the weirdest things to happen, expect people to act weird and strange.
Not
And
in LA. Okay.
I know. But you kind of have to, I would just say, prepare your mind to every person you encounter is going to think that they're a celebrity, or they have some affiliation to a degree. And the reason I say to get your mind in that mindset, so you won't, a lot of people feel jaded when they come to LA because they're like, oh, I'm tired of dealing with these people. I'm tired of dealing with this and this and that. But it just comes with the business. And so you should make sure to prepare yourself and prepare your mind to not only know that this is what you're walking into, but know how to not get so caught up in those things, to stay the course, stay focused, not let some of the weirdness deter you or
You say
demoralize
eccentric, by the way. We don't.
eccentric, we'll say eccentricity. And just know that it may be hard to trust people and make friends here, but if you have the right level of discernment, you can identify, create communities here. It's just about not letting those small things really get to you and stay focused on what your goal is and being your best and most authentic self here.
Yes, being your authentic self is incredibly important. That I think people forget is because they're trying to get into the mold of somebody else. And it's like, well, that person already exists. Why are you trying so hard to be something that you're not?
Yeah, and if you are in a space where you have to kind of create a different person,
Yeah.
people create aliases and identities here all the time, whether you're a musician or an artist or what have you. But you always have to remember where you come from. You always have to remember your roots. You always have to remember to stay humble, and always remember who your actual identity is. And don't let who you want to be become who you actually are, because then you're just going to be like stuck in a cycle of trying to figure out who you are and what you stand for, and you might find yourself in places and spaces where you probably shouldn't be.
Yeah, I don't know if the kids use the word poser anymore, but that seems appropriate right here. Don't be a poser.
Don't be a poser. But you know what? Posers make their way up through the ranks in Hollywood. So,
Yeah.
I mean, if you're going to be a poser, you just have to know what that comes with, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I love what you said, right? Like, because I ask people this same question, like, who are you without your job, without the title, and it sounds like I'd love to hear how you answer that question, because some people are like, well, I don't know who I am without an Amazon, a Netflix, an HBO, and like this attached to their names. And like the fact that you articulated that, like, don't forget who you are, because some people will think, oh, but I am this title and this job that I do.
Yeah, I mean, look, I do struggle with identity in terms of my job, because I works all the time, and it is a big part of my identity, especially when you're walking around in Los Angeles. You are kind of identified and you move socially based off of your affiliations. And so it is sometimes hard to separate the two, but I do know that for me, deep down, I am a Southern boy. I'm a family man. I am a I love hanging out with my friends and my family. I love being loyal to to that. I love spending time with the people that I love. I am a creative, not just by trade, but just my imagination. I'm a man of, values. I'm a man of faith. And so those are the things that I know about myself. I know the qualities that of the qualities about myself that I am. I know what I want to be. I know how I want to act in certain spaces and places. And so those are the things that I keep close to the chest. And, as I'm navigating these treacherous waters here in LA, just keep me grounded that, you know, I could spend 20 hours working, but like at the end of the day, 20 hours working is not going to do anything when I could have spent an hour talking with my little cousin and helping her with, her homework, or saying happy birthday to her. Like those are the things that are the most important, and those are the things that really matter. And so keeping those kind of in the forefront really helps me stay grounded here.
Yeah, that's a great segue, because we wanted to talk a little bit about mental health, right? I came from a very demanding studio side business too. Don't know what it's like for you, but how do you keep that balance? How do you set those boundaries? And what tips do you have for folks that maybe don't know what it looks like to work studio side, because it can be crazy?
Oh, okay, the $1,000,000 question. So it was so funny. I was literally on last Thursday, I texted my friend in my group chat, and I was like, "Y'all, I don't know how I can deal with this. Like, it is like I'm like the politics and the pace is just so much. Sometimes it can be overwhelming." And so I lead with that to say that it's an everyday process. It's an everyday commitment. It is mental
It's
health.
just a business. That's how the business
It's just the
is.
business,
Yeah.
the business, and especially now, like the business that we're in now, it's growing and changing so rapidly and so quickly that you have to be available, you have to respond, you have to be on top of the latest innovations. The industry is so saturated, as I mentioned, from a content perspective. You have to be on top of the latest trends and be ahead of the latest trends, and so it is a 24/7 job, but you have to understand what is most important to you in your life and set those boundaries. With this job, when you work in this industry, obviously there's a level of expectation that you are going to work at the pace that you're expected to work, and you're going to deliver and over deliver, and you have to know that you have to meet that expectation. But especially as a creative, you can't do creative work if you don't have any juice, and so you have to set those boundaries. You have to rest. It's setting a time block to rest is just as important as setting a time block to have a meeting or to do a certain project. Finding hobbies and doing things that you like outside of work is super important to get your mind off of things, to refresh yourself. And so you just have to create those boundaries for yourself, whether that is you work from home 2 days a week, whether that every day at 1 o'clock you set an exercise break where you block off your calendar and you just either exercise or do something personal, whether you decide after a certain time at night you're not going to answer emails or you're not going to be on your laptop. You have to find creative ways, and sometimes it changes week over week based off of your schedule, to find ways to invest in yourself, invest in rest, focus on your mental health, and just
That's actually a very interesting point that you're making, that it can change week after week. Because in my mind, I'm thinking, oh, I'm going to do this now. This is what I'm cementing in, and I'm going to stop answering phone calls. I don't know. But then I know that the following week is going to probably not be the same. But I feel like I have to still keep it consistent that way. But I don't think about that, oh, let's give myself the goal of this week of this small thing of not doing something. And then the next week, I can adjust if necessary.
Right. Like for example, like today, I worked over the weekend. I had a really long night last night. And so, normally I'm like back to back to back to back all day, every day. But, I decided to take a little bit slower today, and, take a little break in between meetings and not be so, on my laptop and responding all the time, because I need a break. I need I need some space mentally. And so I can't just be moving at that pace, but also this is a holiday weekend. And so, I can take a little bit break today, but I know tomorrow through the rest of the week, I have to hit the ground running, and then I'll be able to hopefully fully enjoy a 3-day weekend, that's coming up, and then hit the ground running when I get back, and so I guess it does depend on your schedule, depends on your daily, depends on how you feel. I get migraines and headaches a lot. And so sometimes I just have to like kind of step back and be like, okay, like I really can't do anything. Like I can't even look at the screen. So I have to take a break, and me taking a break, that there's a trickle down effect of that.
Breaks?
So
what are breaks? I've never heard of those.
I know. Look, I that's one thing I did learn. Another thing I learned from politics: take your break, because they will take all your time, and it can be very challenging in those environments, especially coming out of COVID. Like we've all learned how important it is to, take a break and get out of yourself and your environment, because we could find ourselves like stuck in our rooms for days, even just working and just trying to, do great creative work in this industry. So,
yeah. And when people, so I love that advice, the same stuff I tell people, and like a half hour is not going to cut it. Like like a literal focus block should be like 90 to 2 hours, because I've tried the 30-minute breaks, because I've always had the same back to back to back. And like you maybe check email, use the bathroom, grab a drink, and you're back into a meeting. And that gives you no time to be creative. So like if you're spending your whole day in meetings, like what opportunity do you have to get into flow, right? So usually I'll take a 2-hour block, I'll take like a 10-minute walk, then sit down, and that I feel refreshed and like my mind will work better, as opposed to like constant context switching. And then all of a sudden being able to like be creative in that moment of like 45 minutes. It's tough. So like you got to be strategic about how you take these breaks too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you got to treat your body well, because if it just breaks down, then that's
all that really matters. If your body breaks down, doesn't matter what your mind does.
Yeah, and especially working on multiple projects at a time, whether you're in studio, whether you have your own business. I mean, it can be exhausting and on its own, just switching back and forth. I mean, with my job on Chime and chat and email, like there's so much stimuli and people are asking for things, and you need to respond to things very quickly on several different projects. And sometimes it's hard. And so you have to compartmentalize things in order for you to have all your creative juices focused on this one thing, which is super important. So it's like you said, Rico, you have to, take the right amount of time, but you also have to focus and laser in on what you want to do. And so you can really, give all your energy to your creative.
You're just an efficient guy. You're just getting everything done. One of the things that I'm very excited is that you are the future of this business, which I love. I'm so excited. You correct me if I'm wrong, but you're in the first 5 years of just this industry. You've already been doing your stuff. That's fantastic. You already cut your teeth into it. But I'm saying the first 5 years in entertainment, it ages everybody quickly and it ages everybody differently. But you, especially as a man of color, we all got some color on us, all those melanin on this call. How has the business treated you? And has there been anybody to kind of shepherd you through this process, or you just like get in and then, people that just like cross paths with you, you take what you can from them? Like, tell me about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, one, I would say coming into this industry, especially being at Amazon, I've actually encountered some really supportive and open people, if you will. I think that I think part of it is a culture of we need to get this work done, and everybody needs to have the tools that they need in order to get it done. And so, if you don't know, I will help you. I also am not afraid to ask questions. I'm the person, I'm like, look, I'm going to make a way. I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to ask the right questions, but I'm also very open, and I approach things with a certain demeanor and a certain perspective and a certain humility that I think people have come to respect in a certain way, and which has allowed me to have certain conversations and glean insights from people and be in places and spaces. And bottom line is just just being likable, and people just like start to like spending time with me, and I ask good questions, I guess. But I will say it still has been a challenge because the industry is it's such a storied place. People have been in this industry for such a long time, and there is a stigma or an expectation. Well, maybe not a stigma or an expectation, but I will say that there is an expectation that that you've been in this and you've been doing it. So coming in, it's people. I learned the word green. I've been called green, and as inexperienced in entertainment. But the difference is that I brought a different level of experience or a different side of experience that just kind of helps shape the brainchild, right? As a person of color, I definitely feel that that I have to kind of over contribute, overwork, and just kind of make sure all my I's are dotted and T's are crossed, because there aren't a lot of people of color in this industry. There aren't a lot of people of color in leadership and moving the needle, and even looking at the teams and agencies that we use, and that's how we got connected. Trying to find opportunities for creators of color to work in this industry is just a general challenge. And I know there are groups and people that are working to change that, and I want to be a part of that. So it's definitely been a challenge. It's definitely been There's a little bit of imposter syndrome. There's a little bit of just doubt and just of just being green. And of course, I'm wearing a green shirt today. So annoying. But my goal is that I want to, I need to learn. I have so much still to learn, and but I also want to give back and teach people and mentor people and give advice to people and encourage people to jump in and to trust their gut and their instincts, and lean in, because and just take risks, because the only way that we're going to be able to make it in the space is by taking risks. I took a risk by selling all my stuff and moving cross country for
Holy
a job at
cow. That's
Amazon.
not going back.
Yeah. There's no going back. Like I just said, forget it. I'm just gonna go to LA and figure it out. And that's kind of what you have to do, and lean on people and build relationships. And that's really the way to kind of get through it. And don't let your self and your doubt and your questions and your perceived perception of how you think people think about you, don't let that get in the way. Just ask the questions. You only get one shot. you know and 2, 3, 4 years from now, what you were worried about in this, giving a bad impression or coming off as ignorant or whatever, like, it's not going to matter, because you're going to learn.
Yeah.
From it, you're going to move on.
Do you have any quick advice? Because I know you're an extrovert. Do you have any tips for all the introverted artists that are out there so that we can be as brave as you?
Okay. So here's my advice. I would say I write out things I'm going to say before I say it.
Okay.
So, like, I have this little script. It's like a kind of a script. I'm an extrovert. I'm telling you, I'm an extrovert. And I still have a script of trying to figure out what things to say. So when I go into networking events, I'm kind of like, okay, all I have to do is just go up to people, just say, "Hi there, how are you? I'm so and so," and then think of a subject, think of something to talk about. And you know, it's awkward at first, but at least we'll start conversation, you know, and
Yeah.
by doing that over and over again, by taking that risk over and over again, that's the only way that you're going to be able to get better.
Yeah.
And it's also about finding place like introverts come into LA. There's so many introverts here, so many super creative introverted people. Find those people and practice together and like just get, you know, everybody's looking for a friend. Everybody in LA is looking for community. There's not one person in LA, unless they have a family or a dog or something, that they're not looking for some type of community or companionship, because a lot of us are transplants. And so go out there, find people, find community, find mutual interests, and use those people as ways to, you know, beat your introverted nature. Overcome introverted nature.
Yeah, well, the entire Netflix creative studio was introverts.
Yeah. On the studio side?
Yeah, so that's the team I led at Netflix, and every one of them was introvert, and like I was like the introvert leading introverts, so I be an extrovert myself. And the thing that for me that got me to be more extroverted is just like, what's the worst that can happen? Someone says no, whatever, and then all the stories that I told myself have never ever happened. I've never
Yeah.
said anything dumb in a meeting. At least no one publicly said I did. So that means I never got fired. That means I never lost my house. Like all the things that I'm always afraid of saying something in a meeting never happened. So
Yeah.
it's all the fears we tell ourselves, Leonard.
I mean,
it's
look,
all expectations appearing real. All the stories in our head. That's what fears are.
you know, while having all those fears and anxieties
I'm
is
already nervous
bad for
listening to
mental
this,
health.
by the way. I'm like, I feel like this.
I mean, look, it is very scary. And like you said, Rico, like the worst that anybody could say is no. Like I get very nervous and like specific about things. Like I read decks 50 times. I check all my notifications. Like I don't want it. Like I'm just super anal about those things. And by being anal about it, they don't happen. So, you know, I think it's still important to keep in mind those things and like, you know, but just like keep those fears at bay. Don't let them rule you and overtake your mental and your psyche. But you do have to stay in your P's and Q's. I mean, this is something like you could. I'm not gonna scare the people that are listening to this call, but like, you know, things could happen and your reputation is very important. And so you have to kind of take that into consideration, being in small Los Angeles, if you will.
Yeah, and you're not alone. So for people who are hearing this, like you're hearing 3 people have to work through these things on this podcast now. But even Gallup did a poll. It's like 70% of people deal with imposter syndrome, these same fears. And so odds are, if you're in a meeting, 2/3 of that meeting is probably thinking about how do I say something so I'm seen, and then like so people recognize me. And yeah, so my advice to those folks is just say it, because there's probably 2 or 3 other people that are thinking the same thing. And you may save, this happened to us at Netflix, you may save the business $2 million by saying that's actually a bad idea.
I mean, it's so crazy. Like coming, and this is one thing that's been a mind warp for me, is like coming into this industry and being green, if you will, and only being in this industry for three years or so. You know, being on the phone with people who are vets in this industry, and I'm like thinking of things. I'm like, okay, this seems like very like obvious, but like nobody's saying it. So either everybody knows it, or like nobody knows it and they're not gonna say it. So then I say it, and then somebody's like, oh my God, that's such a great idea. Or like,
Yeah.
oh, yeah, I didn't think about that. And I'm like, okay, so not everybody has their ish together here. Not everybody knows the answer. Some people are just posturing. Some people don't even know what they're doing, you know?
Yeah,
And
they get
so
the tunnel vision and they just know what's working. But again, it's like that extra bit that you're bringing in, that outside perspective, you know?
yeah.
It's super important. Like if you look at when I design teams, like when I had that team, I had someone from BPG, Coca-Cola, Microsoft, and then Ignition. Like, so some agency, some tech, some consumer goods, but you get people from different industries just like you. And so people may say you're green, but for me, think you bring more perspective and like a wealth of knowledge outside of the entertainment bubble. So if anyone's voice is important, it's yours, because you're bringing something different to the table. So I'm glad you take that onus and like own it. Like, I'm just going to say it, because I think we need more of that in our industry. Because what Leonard was saying earlier, either there's two perspectives. You're green and malleable, or you're like brown and jaded, right? And brown means like dying and dry and been there for a long time. You know what I mean? So like, yeah, I mean, so like you're bringing fresh perspective. You're bringing stuff that maybe people didn't think about because the experiences you've had are much different. And sometimes entertainment can defy logic sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, to your point, it's so important to just have diverse voices at the table in general. Like, you never want a team that all has the same experience, sounds the same, because you miss your blind spots, right? And so I think while I'm glad to be in this industry, while I'm glad to continue to make waves for other people who are underrepresented to be in this industry, is because we need that diversity of thought. We need, and especially in entertainment. I mean, underrepresented populations have made some significant strides over the past decade in, advocating for people to make content that appeals to them, that relates to them, with people that look like them. And so now we're in a space where you can't just create big franchise content that's going to hit everybody. I mean, you can, but those are becoming far fewer in between. Like you have to create content specific for these audiences because they want to see themselves. And the only way you can do that authentically is by having people of different backgrounds at the table. And in order for creative to be most effective for the widest reach of audience, you have to have that perspective. You have to have, you have to have somebody who paints in watercolors. You have to have somebody that paints or that draws in, graphics. You have to have somebody who's a writer. You have to have somebody who's been doing this filmmaking for a long time. You have to have those vets. You have to have the new people. You have to have, you have to have all that, Tetris of diversity. So I love being a part of that and love being able to be on spaces like this to promote that, because it's essential, especially during a time where people are attempting to deprioritize or devalue the value of diversity. It's even more important than ever.
Well said. Well said. Well, it takes chutzpah to be creative. And thank you for sharing everything with us. You're incredible. You're going to do great. You're the future of this business. I hope everybody's listening, especially you, Mr. and Mrs. Amazon, or Mr. and Mr. or Mrs. and Mrs. or everything in between. Thank you, Cameron, for being on with us today. And thank you, Rico, for hopping on and co-hosting. And this has been another episode of Creative Chutzpah. Rico, you got anything last?
No, this is amazing. Thank you, Cameron, for taking the time, hanging out with us. Great conversation.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Yeah. All right. Have a good one, all.
Take it easy.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Creative Leadership with Heart. If you enjoyed the show, please like and subscribe. If you're ready to make huge, lasting change in your life, then what are you waiting for? What will your life look like if you took action today? What would it look like if you didn't? If you're serious and you're ready, book your free strategy session today and let's make your future a reality.